Hey, how's it going, universe? Welcome to another episode of Zoobox Goes to the Movies. This week, I'm going to be talking about everything: The Great Gatsby, the book, two of the movies, two out of the four movies. We'll get into that a little bit, little trivia for you. And today, I'm going to be joined with Sarah coming back. This is
Hello.
Sarah is a big F. Scott Fitzgerald fan, so I figured it would be worth talking to her about these things. This movie was kind of a request. I think Maverick requested this, so here you go, buddy. And yeah.
Thanks for having me here.
No problem.
I had to travel very far to get
Traveling.
to this gig.
So, I guess we just kind of talk about the book a little bit first. I think, most people probably read this in high school. That's generally where most people come into contact
Yeah.
with the Great Gatsby. It's usually one of like your sophomore year, your junior year book.
Mhm. Yeah,
That's-
I read it junior year.
Yeah.
I was in like honors English, so I had more like of a thematic. It might be the same for most people, but I think we were doing like American lit, and then my 12th grade was like Brit lit focused, I guess. So
Yeah, I think it was just in our whatever. Well, actually, no, I think I was in honors English. Yeah.
yeah, see, yeah.
I would have been a junior.
For the
So yeah.
kids who like are smart but don't feel like just taking it to that next level. We
No,
didn't want to do the AP work.
no, no, not worth it.
No, actually, it might have been. I don't know.
No,
You have
probably. Of course, it's worth it.
huh.
No, I don't even because I don't remember like really caring. I just didn't care about that kind of stuff. I was
Yeah.
too. I was a teenager. I was apathetic. You go in, you talk to your advisor, or whatever, and they're like, well, they're not very helpful.
No, I
It's
had the
in the
worst
American school
experience.
system. They're not
Yeah.
helpful.
And my high school guidance counselor was terrible.
That's like when like all the stuff that's going on with the teachers and the teachers unions across the country. I'm like, fire them,
Right.
fire them. Like,
That's why tenure can be a bad thing. Can
I
be.
mean, I've how many teachers do you think you've had over your life? I'm talking about high school teachers. Fuck them,
Yeah,
fire them. How many that you had that were actually good,
probably like 5
if that,
out
right?
of all 4 years. I mean, I actually still talk to 3 of my high school teachers. They like a couple of them found me on Facebook and reached out.
So you think you had more than not good teachers?
No, I had more teachers than that over the 4 years. What I'm saying is there's maybe 5 that were either impactful or good. Like,
Yeah, I probably had like three in
you
my
do.
whole life.
We had
My
this guy that
entire
would
life.
lose his temper and like throw chalk at people and never got in trouble because I don't think there's much he could do or they could do to him. So it was just kind of like,
Well, high school teachers are different. They don't have the same protections that like university professors have. They don't
yeah,
have here. They don't have that kind of stuff. But they have the teachers union, which is what it's I guess a sidebar conversation. But
yeah,
I say for whatever reason this came up, I say fuck them. I say fire them. I say get people in there that want to teach your kids, that are
yeah.
excited about it, that want to get back to the classroom
Hmm.
and
Or
teach people about the Great Gatsby.
that's not how you feel about the Great Gatsby,
Well,
though.
let's find out. So this book comes out in 1925, comes out in the United States. It is something of a overnight success. It's the kind of the thing that projected F. Scott Fitzgerald into kind of wider acclaim. He had been a name for a while. A lot of short stories. He did the your favorite book,
The Side of Paradise.
this Side of Paradise, was his first novel that was
Hmm.
also very successful, but this is the one that really cemented him as like people thought of him as like a great American writer.
For a short
Because he,
period of time.
yeah, honestly, yeah,
And then
because
he
it ends up
became
being like a
obscure and it was sad.
it's like a 9 year period where he's like living high on the hog,
Hmm.
and a lot of that people equate with the Depression because of what his subject matter is, the things that he's making observations about. Maybe not the most appealing thing to just like any Joe Schmo or people going through dire straits or whatever. It would be like tantamount to somebody like watching The Wolf of Wall Street during like the financial collapse or
Yeah.
something. You know what I mean? Like maybe or if you had just gone through a financial hardship or something, maybe you wouldn't enjoy The Wolf of Wall Street for what it is or whatever. But
Yeah. No, I could totally see that. And I think, he let a lot of his personal hangups too get the best of him. He was very self-destructive. He also did a lot of things to please his wife, much like characters in The Great Gatsby, where we'll talk about that more, I guess. So I think that also is kind of his downfall, especially his alcoholism.
Oh,
That
for
like,
sure.
yeah, like that kind of stuff just really, because he wasn't like a lot of the other writers he's compared to. I don't think where it was like he was a super like everyone like there's a lot of people that when they have issues with substance or like that's where they find like their creative pops and stuff. I don't think that was Fitzgerald at all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, because I think it's, like we said, it's kind of reflected in his work, the kind of things that he writes about, the kind of people, the lifestyles that he talks about. He's coming at it from much more of a personal, kind of almost
Yeah.
journalistic perspective, right? Because he's
Yeah.
rolling in reality, like he has the living soundtrack concept where he's actually making note of songs of the era, weaving it into his story, trying to make it come alive. So it's really more of it's probably just somebody that got too old, like in the same way where you see like middle-aged people that are still doing what they were doing when they were 25, and it's kind of
Right.
sad. Just don't let it go, you know?
Well, and I think that you brought up a really good thing. That's actually another reason I kind of like jumped into Fitzgerald further was like in college when I was a art history and philosophy major. Got me real far with that. But I mean, amongst the things I focused on in philosophy, I found a really cool thing with my like study in aesthetics and kind of like society. I could find a way to bring in like romanticism and Fitzgerald with this thing that it was actually a UCLA doctorate candidate at the time was also working on. So it's kind of funny. You find like an idea and then you find someone else that's kind of working on the same thing at the same time, like on the other coast. So that was kind of neat. But it talks about the portable soundtrack and how because of the technology that became available like around Fitzgerald's time, so like record players and those kinds of things, it was important to add that like sensory experience to literature. So it's like the first time you could actually make it visceral on multiple levels,
Yeah, I
So
mean, it's
to
this
me, that's like a really important tool that like is
it's a
used.
it's a texture. It's the same kind of thing we would
Yeah,
have in the modern era where, people in the 80s, they're at home watching a movie. You see a family watching a movie as like a camera pans across. It adds texture. It actually makes it feel more recognizable, more like and you can invest in it more because it's a world that you recognize. Oh, we have the same pop culture references.
right.
Like,
Or
so it's impactful to the people in those immediate moments, right? And to
right.
that, like, it brings it into your life.
Or even to people like us, or if you want to take the time to go back and listen to what's being talked about, you can kind of put yourself to where they were, and that's kind of cool to me. It gives
Yeah,
you like that dimension of
I think, in hindsight, like if you're kind of
artful
like
experience.
if you want to have a deeper experience with the book, you can go track down the songs and listen to them while you're reading the passages and whatnot. But
Which
I
I
think
did for this side of paradise.
yeah, but I think though, like it was just more of him being young, contemporary writer, and he's
Yeah.
writing about the world around him, and he's incorporating things in the world around him,
And
just in the same way, like I said, people incorporated the movies they had watched or music of an era, or people using Discmans and boomboxes, and
and he very much did that in every. Not necessarily always his short stories because that wasn't his favorite thing to do. Those were his like quick money makers, and even one of his greatest friends was actually Ernest Hemingway. Hemingway kind of mentioned that he kind of like killed his spark doing so many of those to always try to keep up with Zelda or like keep up with the promise of this lifestyle. Or when he finally like started like flirting and seeing other women or like all these like jet set travels and stuff. So I won't necessarily always speak to his short stories, but like with his major stories, it is very much big major beats of his life are in those characters. I mean, because you could talk about, even like Zelda, pretty much it's implied like aborted their second child,
mhm.
and there is a choice in, that in one of the books where it's just like they talk about the dynamics of like making that decision in that era. Or you can talk about like money and opulence and what that means, or being like a young Ivy League college guy, like in this side of paradise. And I always thought that was really cool, but I think this is something that you've talked about when we've briefly talked about was like it's hard for people that don't necessarily know a ton because he's putting so much of his personal experience into it sometimes.
Well, I think a
Because
lot of times, like his character, like you said, I think like all of the characters or a lot of the main characters in his stories, and I'm not like a Fitzgerald aficionado, so correct me if I'm wrong, But he's
Trying to
just
think.
he's kind of doing like a like taking pieces, other aspects of himself, and kind of shifting them around characters. So kind of
Yeah,
like, with the Gatsby specifically, I think like, part of him is Nick Carraway, part of him is Gatsby, but I think it's like the way that those characters are positioned. I feel like that's because he's feels more like Nick Carraway and would like to be more like Gatsby, just from the sense
yeah,
of like how he writes it and where he's coming from. But even though they are
sure.
kind of a split of him, and then you have obviously Daisy is with shades of Zelda and this kind of
And
always
his first,
chasing feeling, this kind of
yeah, and Daisy's actually also it's a good combination of Zelda and then his first love, which is actually a lady that broke his heart in college, and who he credits to like propelling his alcoholism in life. So his alcoholism started like late college years, which I don't know if he
sure,
finished college. But so it's a combination of those two, and then there's like a character in This Side of Paradise because it goes through like his five early loves. But the other interesting thing too I like to bring up was actually in his earliest works, he verbatim took passages from Zelda's diary
mm-hmm,
and like pretty much put them into the work, which is actually he also did in Great Gatsby. Like some of Daisy's best lines are verbatim things, Zelda said and did.
sure, yeah,
Like the beautiful full line when they talk about when their daughter was born. That is exactly what Zelda said when their daughter Scotty was born.
yeah,
So he
yeah,
pretty much just like took it, So to me, that like when you find out little tidbits of that, that's interesting. I mean, the plagiarism of Daisy's diary becomes a thing later because then he tries to stop her from when he's trying to finish his last work because he accuses her of doing the same thing and literally legally gets to put like a block on her writings
yeah.
because he's claiming she's stealing it. And I'm like, oh, that's rich, But so I know that's kind of interesting to me that not only is it from personal experience, but it's like literal, it's like actual events and like words and stuff. So it's
So where does Gatsby the novel, where does it rank for you in the Fitzgerald's like works, like his oeuvre?
hmm.
Have you read every Fitzgerald book or no?
I have not made it all the way through Tenders of the Night.
Okay.
I've read The Last Tycoon, which that's a debatable thing. It's kind of like how I feel about when people talk of the will to power in Nietzsche, because it's like their intentions and words, but finished or compiled by another person. So sometimes you have to wonder, like, whether that person, how well that person knew them, whether it was Nietzsche's sister or Fitzgerald's writing buddy. Like, yeah, you knew them super well, but there were probably different intentions, especially for like Nietzsche's sister.
Well,
But for me, it's like
for
how,
Nietzsche, yeah.
yeah, no, I'm just saying, but it's in the same tone of like, well, how do I approach this work knowing that was incomplete? You know what I mean?
I
And yeah, there's
think
notes and stuff left, but
from what
I
I
like,
understand,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
from what I understand, because I watched the document, like an old PBS documentary
Yeah, the
about
one I have written.
Fitzgerald, and I think he was pretty far along in The Last Tycoon, if I'm not mistaken.
I
He
can't
is,
remember.
I think he was like in the last 100 pages of the book or something.
Right. Which
Um,
I couldn't remember, but I would say Gatsby. Because there's a couple really really good short stories, and actually the crack up's really cool because it's like really interesting compilation of thoughts. Yeah, it's probably like third if you count like I would say like so it's for me This Side of Paradise, an amalgamation of like short stories and little essays, not individually but just kind of as a group. I could pick like five probably. Like the Offshore Pirate, Benjamin Button, great. But the Offshore Pirate's actually really really good short story. So May Gatsby's three just for prominence sake, but also like it is fun to talk about.
sure, yeah.
And then I would probably, and I can't speak. I literally had started Tenders Night like years ago, and then just for whatever reason fell off of it. I don't know
Hmm.
what I had going on.
I'm not. I read this in high school. I
Mhm.
found it incredibly boring and never really looked back.
See, it's because you don't like romance. No, I'm
Well, no,
kidding.
that's not true at all. But like I think I read The Curious Case of Benjamin Button around the time the movie was coming out, the
Mhm.
David Fincher movie, which is not a good movie, by the way, everybody.
No,
Um, Not an awful movie. It's just David Fincher should not have made that movie. But
just bored.
yeah, I never kind of looked back, so I never. decided to investigate like the larger, broader works of his stuff.
I think you'd like him because he's an easy accessible read, but it still comes off as like smart and beautiful. So it's like kind of like one of those you tell me all the time when I want to get like talk about getting back into reading. You're like, find something easy. So because I tend to find like something that I was really hard to read that I enjoyed, but when I'm like, when you don't read, it's hard sometimes. So I would say that Fitzgerald is definitely one of those people.
I think his prose is beautiful. He's a very good writer.
It's very descriptive, which I like.
I think when I was in high school, I was too young to really grapple with what it was about. And now that I'm older, I'm too far past it.
See, that's how I felt with Catcher in the Rye. And it's also like we've talked about, necessarily because I'm like not a young man either.
Yeah.
But I somehow didn't read it in high school. And then when I did read it, it was like I was in my 20s. And I was just like, So I would say it's a similar thing, but also I also can't.
No, I think that's totally fair. Catcher in the Rye is not for everybody. I have okay memories of Catcher in the Rye, but I read it when I was 19. Like so, that was even late for reading that, but I read it when I was like 19. But I think that's totally a fair parallel. But because I read it, when I reread it in anticipation of doing this and watching the movies, I didn't like hate it. I didn't like despise my time with it or anything, but I was kind of like, it's so weird. It's so influential that you know it almost by osmosis. Like so many things have pulled from these themes and these kinds of characters, these kinds of ideas. So you're just kind of like, I just like knew everything already. It was so weird. It was a weird experience because I had, like I said, I read it in high school. And then I read it like a few weeks ago, and I still knew the story so well. And I think it's part of that's because I had seen, at least seen the Baz Luhrmann movie, which is one of the ones we're going to talk about. And it is the book for the most part. Like it's actually pretty close. I mean, the way they contextualize things changes things, but the skeleton and the structure is the book. Like they don't really deviate.
Yeah, but I think the more I've sat with since we've watched it again, because I remember being like, I was so back and forth because we first saw it when it came out in the theater. We haven't watched it since, except for when we decided to do this, correct?
Yeah, we bought it like 5 years ago, and it's just been sitting on the shelf. Yeah, it was like a Black Friday or something, and I think it was like $5. No, it wasn't. No, I think it was Black Friday. It was like $4. We're like, okay, now we're gonna buy it.
Yeah, now we'll buy it.
And then I got the newer one or the older one, the 74 one.
Which I was so surprised you never saw that. Like because of what it is. You're usually the person that's like, yeah, I've seen this. I've been,
Yeah.
Also surprised you didn't watch it in school. I mean, I don't necessarily know what your high school was like. I went to a public school in Baltimore, so anytime they could wheel that TV card in, buddy.
Oh, we had that. They just didn't show us the Great Gatsby. Or if they did, maybe I wasn't there that day or something. I do remember, I think I tried to watch it years ago. It might have been even when we were together when it was on TV, and I was just bored and I just shut it off. Because I didn't care about that story. So I never ever felt the need to seek it out. Also, I don't think when I was younger, I didn't like Robert Redford for some reason. I'm fine with him now, but when I was younger, I'm like, fuck Robert Redford.
He seems very, I don't know, his performance, we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's just kind of, it's okay. I mean, he's a handsome man.
He's a movie star.
Yeah, but I
cast Robert Redford to be Robert Redford. He doesn't play characters.
Right.
He's like Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt. They're not good at playing characters. You know what I mean?
Tom Cruise is good at jumping out of planes.
Yeah, he is. That's why he gets the big bucks.
And getting loud.
You ever see him run? You lie. We watched. I was watching Mission Impossible a couple months ago. It was the last one, and Sarah's not really seen most of them. She was like, "Whoa, this is actually pretty awesome." It's it's a great action movie. It's a great action movie.
Yeah, no.
How dare you?
I will say, but I mean, seeing him run, he's like a little man. So of course he's gonna be like.
Oh, it's so awesome! The cruise run just gets your blood pumping. Gets your heart going, your heart rate up.
I think I would have probably been more impacted by those movies if I had seen them in theater. I've never seen a Mission Impossible in theater.
Listen, guys, she was totally into Mission Impossible Fallout.
I'm not saying I wasn't. It's impressive. I gave it that.
She said it was a good. Sarah likes to get this revisionist history. It's usually what she'll say is like, "Oh, I didn't really like that," and then like a year later, she's like, "Oh, I remember really liking that."
I did that with what was the new that Godzilla at Foster Lakes, the King of the Monsters. I was like, yeah, this isn't so bad. And you're like, you fucking hated this
Oh
movie.
yeah, you were giving me all sorts of crap because I was wanted to watch it again.
I mean, I guess maybe
Sad
just seeing it through
this
my
household.
child's eyes has touched my heart. I don't know.
Honestly, that's true. When you watch it with like a lot of things with Foster, it'll soften me a lot on stuff that I really disliked or thought was stupid. Like we were almost gonna watch Monster Hunter today, the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I thought like, oh, he might like that. 20 minutes in, then I just couldn't do it. I had to shut it off. I was like, nope.
You're probably doing him a favor though,
Paul
right?
W.S. Anderson. No, I've already scarred him enough. I showed him Alien versus Predator, same director.
But
Mila
he
Jovovich.
asked for that movie though.
Yeah, he did. But that one I kind of could understand just because it's just the iconography. It's not cleverly done. It's not cinematic,
I'm
but
pretty sure when
you see all of the things that you want to see.
yeah, I'm pretty sure when he went to your mom's the last time, he asked her if Opa would watch that with him, and she had asked permission. I'm pretty sure they watched it together. I was like, oh, that's
You
cool.
might have. Yeah.
Yeah. We're way off track. We're
Yeah.
talking about predators and aliens. That's fine.
Oh, we were starting to talk. Oh, because we were talking about Robert Redford being
Yeah,
cast.
I mean, I guess just to like close up about Fitzgerald, I think he had a very tragic, interesting life. Granted, he was kind of a piece of shit, but
It seems like him and Zelda were kind of awful.
But Zelda, to her own credit, was being a wild socialite, and she had schizophrenia. So it's kind of like
Yes, and that is something. Apparently, it was kind of there's a lot of revisionist history out there about Zelda. But I
Mhm.
was again watching that documentary. It's her family, like her descendants, were like, no, she had schizophrenia. Everybody knew she had schizophrenia. That's why she was a mental institution. Like it was well known because
Yeah, but
people in like the 90s and I guess in the 80s and 90s were trying to romanticize like her life.
Zelda, yes,
And this
she
is kind
became.
of I think this is kind of what that Christina Ricci series that came
It
out a
is
few years ago, where they're trying to like make it. She was just a force of nature woman, like
right. That was dealing with this like rough,
patriarchal
almost like a
swinger
Tom
jazz
Buchanan.
stuff.
Yeah. No, but it's also, with Zelda. Actually, I will say, speaking to like the literature, I will recommend to people to pick up they have their love letters to each other in a collection. There is some very insightful, sweet reading in those.
I like to
Uh,
smell your farts.
no, that's James Joyce, literally with
Yes.
his wife. They were like giddy, like they were into that. They were into that.
Fecal play. Yeah.
He would talk about that in his letter. James Joyce is a weirdo. Anyway,
Fart
that's
in
a
this
whole
bag and
nother
send it to me in the post.
book of letters. No, yeah, it talked about like wanting to feel her shit and stuff. Yeah, it's
There's a name for it. I don't know what it is, but
scatophilia.
gotta feel you would be afraid. No, is that or love?
The love. Phobia is fear.
Oh yes,
Philia is
right.
love.
Man, it must be something like that.
Scatophilia, probably.
We'll say that, sure.
How did I know that off the top of my head? Anyway. No, but I will say their love letters, there are some very like deep and intense things, very like crazy things. They talk about the world. So it's kind of interesting, to read their correspondence. It is sad when you learn like some of the stuff they do, like when she thought he was flirting with someone, which he probably was, because to speak to his characters, they do that all the time. He threw herself down a set of stairs in this mansion party in front of like a fucking room full of people, and just like it's crazy. Um, I mean, she was in Baltimore for most of her life too, and you would just leave her to go to the West Coast. She was committed in Baltimore. Yeah, he's married in or buried in Rockville, so that's interesting. I've been there.
Yeah.
Pretty gravesite by a little tiny church. The family had a petition to get them moved there because the church didn't want them at first. So
Oh,
had to
really?
get. Yeah, it's like there was something weird with like they were buried or like wanted to be buried and couldn't because they were kind of like apprehensive. I think it's because of some religious background or something like that. And then eventually the family petitioned, and then they're at the gravesite that they're at now. I remember it is kind of like such a small church that like you feel weird going to like go to it. I mean, it's open to the public, but I think there was like a service or something going on. I just felt very like someone's gonna run out and like throw a book at me because it was like a small, really pretty. Rockville's a very pretty, small, historic town. It's nice. Anyway.
Yeah. So, anyways, that'll bring us to the first adaptation that we watched. There's actually 4 adaptations, and the reason why
I didn't know that until you told me.
There's a 1926 one, and there's a 1949 one, which coincidentally, Mia Farrow's father was actually originally supposed to direct the 1949 one, but he didn't end up doing it. So, whatever. But, so when this movie comes out, I think was it Warner Brothers? Was it Warner? I think it's Warner Brothers who put this out. They basically got rid of or like put away the other 2 versions so that theaters would not play any other version but this one. So they were lost to time for years. It wasn't until 2012 they actually found the 2049 version. So it was only like 8 or 9 years ago that they actually rediscovered the 49 version.
It'd be really interesting to like see if we could find it and see how that's portrayed because it's so actually close after the actual time period. I'd be really curious to see.
Well, there's one in 1926, a silent film version.
And where is that, Shaun?
No, that's gone. They've never found it.
That's what I mean. So I'm saying it'd be really cool though to see the one we could see closest to the era, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. No, for sure.
It doesn't have Jay-Z in it, Jay-Z music, but
maybe it could though. You could make your own soundtrack. It's like when Portishead did their own version of The Passion of Joan of Arc.
Wait, what?
Which is actually really cool, but they did like a score for it.
Okay.
Because they were such fans of the movie, they just did a score for it. It's on the Criterion that we have.
Okay.
So this is, The Great Gatsby, 1974, directed by Jack Clayton, adapted by Francis Ford Coppola, although it seems pretty contentious about how much of this is actually Coppola's and how much they redid while they were shooting the movie, because Coppola hates this movie for some reason. He says it's not his vision. Stars Robert Redford, Mia Farrow, Bruce Dern, Karen Black, Sam Waterston, Scott Wilson, Howard Da Silva, and others. The plot synopsis is a Midwesterner becomes fascinated with his nouveau riche neighbor who obsesses over his lost love.
That's an interesting way to describe that book. But
IMDb sometimes they're like that's like the first act.
Well, it's not even that. It's just like he's going to see it. He ends up where he is, and
this one's
related to this girl. Anyways.
Nick Carraway, a young Midwesterner now living on Long Island, finds himself fascinated by the mysterious past and lavish lifestyle of his neighbor, the nouveau riche Jay Gatsby. He is drawn into Gatsby's circle, becoming a witness to obsession and tragedy. That's a little bit better.
Yeah, that's better.
A little bit better. Anyways, so I had never seen this before. It's the first time I've ever watched this version of the movie. I've seen the Baz Luhrmann one probably 3 times maybe now that we watched it again.
Yeah, I'd say I'm probably 3 times with that one. I've seen this for the version we're getting ready to talk about. I've probably seen it like 5 or 6 times.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Watch it in school. I've watched it independent of school.
And so what do you think just off the top? Do you like this version? Do you prefer it to the Baz Luhrmann one?
I would be stupid to say no. No, I do, for the fact there are beats of the Baz Luhrmann one I don't mind, but I prefer this one because it is more it's on point with the book in the sense that there is more dialogue taken from the book. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's hard without bringing up the Luhrmann one. Like you get really distracted in the Luhrmann one in bad ways. And with this one, you actually get a little bit more of the sentiment. I think Sam Waterston's a really, really good Nick.
Yeah.
Mia Farrow bothers me sometimes. I'm just saying because she's weepy, and I guess Daisy is supposed to be weepy, but it's a little distracting sometimes. Like I think if they would have taken the 2 Daisies and kind of meshed a little bit, it would have been a little bit better. I think the scores does a good job because there are a few songs that are from the era. There's maybe like three of them, 3 or 4, and then a really quiet, almost non-existent score. So you don't get too distracted, but when you do hear something being sung, it's very appropriate to what's happening. I still think it was a pretty movie for what it was. I don't know. I prefer it though.
Yeah, I would say out of the two, I probably prefer this one. It is much more straightforward. It's trying to actually capture, like, in a traditional sense, the essence of the novel. That's what it's going for.
The,
The characters are probably a little bit closer, and we're going to get into the Baz Luhrmann thing because the
yeah.
the juxtaposition is basically the approach, like how they approach the story.
Mhm.
Um, but
Which
I found it like very I don't know. I mean, Jack Clayton, the director, he's kind of envisioning it as a little bit of a soap opera. It even has kind of the soft focused lighting, and everything's kind of gotten a glow to it. It's
yeah,
a
it's
little,
because I think that helps portray that like sense of wonder, which is very much what is kind of, especially when you're thinking about like Nick, right? Like you're kind of in the time period, right? And the American dream, because that's a big theme for the story is like the loss of the American dream, the chasing and the loss of it, right?
yeah, to a certain extent, yeah.
Right. So to me, and then hope and these things. So I think it's really cool. It's really soft and kind of quiet and toned down just slightly.
Well, this one is, I would say if I have a problem with this one, it is
Mm,
kind of I think the direction. It's just a little. It's kind of very one note and
soap
very
opery.
not even soap opera. It's just so like there feels like there's no pace to this movie. Like it's
Mm,
just kind of scene after scene. I understand how they go together, but they're not doing anything cinematic to draw me in. And
right.
I also felt sometimes like the actors felt like furniture, like they're like props to be used by the director. Like
That's fair.
they're a little lifeless. And but like I still would say I probably prefer this one just because I think it captures the spirit of the not having just read the novel. And if my criterion is to like figure out which one best represents the book, it's probably this one,
See,
100%.
and it's so funny because if you know me, I'm very much like an aesthetic and like visual person. So you would think I would appreciate the Luhrmann a little bit more, but I just more I wrap my brain about it, it's like it's frustrating. I
Yeah,
mean, because there's not a ton though. I mean, I'm not trying to be dismissive of the it's from the what 70 what
74.
74 movie, but it's kind of we just said everything neatly about it. But it's
Yeah, I
not
mean, there's
negative. It's just like it's very simple, and I think it's a fine. I think that's what I would show someone if they were like curious about The Great Gatsby. I'd probably show them that one
I
first.
see. To me, it would
Because that's
depend
how
on. It would be totally depend on who. I think
on
this
who.
movie.
Oh.
I think this. If you were to show it to your like a general audience, just a regular person that doesn't have any attachment to the Great Gatsby, I
Yeah, they'd be
think they're
bored.
going to be a little bored. To be honest with you.
See,
And
but we've talked about this too. I feel the same way about the that Romeo and Juliet. I think it was around the same time.
the
We've talked about
'60s. Oh, the one in the '60s.
the one in the '60s. I really like that version. Kind of the same way I like
Well,
this
but I
version of The
think,
Great Gatsby, but it's maybe because I love those things. Like I love Shakespeare, and I love those things so
yeah,
much.
yeah, but you're also already familiar with the source material. But I
Right?
don't think it's a '70s thing, like old movie thing. I think it's
No,
just like the direction is just Jack Clayton is just his direction is just
bad.
flat.
Okay.
It's not even that it's bad. It's just serviceable. Like if somebody had told me this was like a TV movie, I'd be like, yeah, okay. I
Yeah,
could see this premiering like over 2 nights on ABC in 1974.
it probably did.
Um, like,
um.
but there is good. There is stuff I like about it though. I think Bruce Dern, he's Tom Buchanan, and
Oh
Karen Black as Myrtle Wilson. I think they're fantastic. Actually, Scott Wilson as George Wilson, Myrtle's husband, is also very good.
yes, I really enjoyed Myrtle's husband. I thought that was great. See, you and I are going to argue about Tom Buchanan.
Well, I think just Bruce Dern just did a good Tom Buchanan,
That was fine,
and I think
but
that I think the weakest links in the movie are Redford and Mia Farrow. I think
mm,
they're the flattest, and if you believe Mia Farrow basically says that Robert Redford was so preoccupied with the Watergate scandal that he like would not rehearse and he wouldn't come out and spend time with the crew and stuff. He would go into his trailer and just watch news all day and only come out when he had to shoot.
that might have been true though. I mean,
No, it was true because Redford was obsessed with Watergate. He actually a couple years later makes the movie All the President's Men
oh, that's right.
about
Yeah.
the two journalists.
So she might not be wrong. I mean,
No, I don't think she's wrong. I was, just kind of being playful, I suppose, if
No,
you believe Mia Farrow, because Mia Farrow also says that Woody Allen's a child molester,
I
and
kind of
whether
believe
or not
that actually.
that's true, I don't know. So maybe
I
she's
believe
just a
it.
truth teller. She's straight from the hip.
He's a fucking weirdo. I believe it.
Well, even if he's not a child molester, he's certainly, I don't know. There's something suspect there.
100%.
Um, but yeah.
Uh,
Anyways, so I like most of the cast. Like you said, it was Sam Waterston
mm,
was a great Nick
I
Carraway.
I think if once we start comparing the two, better of Nick Carraway's. Like,
Yeah, you can say which one you like prefer. No, I mean,
no, I think
I think Myrtle is better in this. I think
yes.
um and Nick Carraway mostly. Those are the ones that stick out to me the most.
Yeah, see, but you and I are gonna disagree on the Tom, and we'll talk about that. I like
Yes.
the bomb. That is the one time where the bombast and the over the top was better, in my opinion.
All right. Well, so let's bring it down. Let's go get into it. Let's get into the
All right.
Baz Luhrmann's 2013 adaptation of The Great Gatsby. Sarah and I saw this in movie theaters. We saw it in 3D as it was meant to be seen.
Yep. Wait,
Uh,
wait,
yeah.
wait.
My beautiful shirts.
Or when she's just flying off of the car. Whoa.
Yeah, because it was definitely a movie, and
Or ashes shaking in your face. That was fun.
it was definitely 100% made with the 3D
Oh
intentionally.
yeah.
So it's not like a atmospheric 3D or whatever. And I think that's part of why it looks so ugly and has not aged very well in terms
Mm.
of like it's just aesthetic look.
Until we get
But
our
anyways,
3D TV,
yeah, they don't even make them anymore.
No, I know.
I should have jumped on that train like 5 years ago. I could have got
But
one on the cheap.
oh my gosh, the train
I
has
own 3D
left the
movies. I've
station.
never been able to watch them.
Coraline. Anyway, um, no, this was one of the first movies we saw together in a theater, though. I think.
Pretty
The first one
close.
was
I think.
Freaking Weenie.
Yeah, it's probably. I think it was when we moved down south from Maryland. It would have been like a couple months after that. It came
Yeah.
out in May. So,
I
but
was
yeah, we
just saying that's
saw it
how
in the
long ago
theater.
that was.
Yes, it was. Yeah, 8 years ago, almost 8 years ago. Pretty crazy. Um, but yeah, so we saw it in the theater. So we've seen this the way it was meant to be seen. So our opinion, pretty valid. Actually, I think there is an old podcast of us talking about this. If people
Actually,
can
there
find
is
it, yeah, there is.
on the streaming page.
Yeah, if you go to the other YouTube channel, the one where we have to do the streaming for now, there is an old episode where we talk about it, I think for like 45 minutes.
Let me
But
just speak for people start going and digging. I used to get pretty trashed and just not make
not
sense.
not
Yeah.
in that one. Not that one.
Thank you. I'm
That
just
one. That one.
forewarning.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah. So I used to like Baz Luhrmann. I like Baz Luhrmann to a
I do
certain
too.
degree. I grew up watching Romeo and Juliet,
Which
um,
to comment
Moulin
on his
Rouge.
let's say to comment on his book adaptations, Romeo and Juliet, and then you got Great Gatsby. I
Well,
think one was better than the other.
let's talk about that though. Okay.
Yeah.
So what he's doing something very specific with Great Gatsby and very similar to what he did with Romeo and Juliet, where he blows it up and
Mhm.
makes this kind of pop opera, like kind of modern take. He's trying to literally engage with like the people of a time period. So he's
Right.
trying to. So when he takes Shakespeare, he wanted to make it flashy and cool and music video edits and crazy and colorful, so that
Tom
if
York. Yeah.
so an 18-year-old or a 16-year-old could get into Romeo and Juliet.
Oh yeah, I get
Um,
that.
I think it works much better there because I think the practical nature of that movie is what makes it so memorable. That's what makes it so cool. Like the design, everything's in camera. It's real stuff happening. It's like Gatsby is just so CGI heavy, oddly, that it's distracting. And I think that was a choice because of the 3D stuff, but
Yes.
I don't know.
I also think though too, it's the real tragedy. Like Baz Luhrmann should have really succeeded with Gatsby. Like speaking to the things we've already talked about, like uh, portable soundtracks, making music a thing that kind of sets you in the tone of a story and puts you in a time or reminds you of sentiments, and um,
But he,
like loud and lavish. But I don't think his choices were the best.
well, because
I
he
remember
does,
walking out of the theater saying how much the music annoyed and distracted me. And no, it's not because I don't like hip hop or whatever.
So
It just did
for
not
people
fit.
that don't know, he wanted to kind of pay homage to Fitzgerald. I think it's pretty clear. He does a modern soundtrack. A lot of
Mm.
it's like Jay-Z wrote some songs, or I think he did most of the score, if
He's
I'm not
also a
mistaken.
producer on the film.
He's a producer on the movie as well. So the movie utilized a lot of hip hop, and I think it's because it's like considered like the youth music of the time, in the same way that like ragtag jazz stuff in the 1920s
Yeah.
is the youth music of the time. You were cool and hip if you were out there listening to jazz music and smoking cigarettes. And
Doing the
now,
Charleston.
if you're cool and hip in 2013, you're listening to Jay-Z and you're drinking Hennessy and you like, bitches and big screen TVs. That's your
Listen,
thing.
Hova.
So, I mean, he's doing like a thing intellectually. It was something that like I understood what he was doing, and
Yeah. I
I
think it
think it
was
was a
missed.
choice. I just think it doesn't always work. I think it probably works less than it actually works. If he had just made this a lavish production of The Great Gatsby and just did kind of more straightforward version of it, it's probably pretty successful because the things that work about it is the cast. It's kind of the tone. He does this. It's big. Everybody's
Mm.
big. Everybody's broad. Everything is like cranked up to 15.
Mm.
All the emotions are cranked up to 15. And I think most of the actors handle it pretty well. But
Most.
and this is where our point of contention is. So Sarah said, "Oh, we're going to disagree because of the Tom Buchanan thing." Because I think Bruce Dern was a good Tom Buchanan in the '74 version. I my rebut and Sarah likes Joel Edgerton,
I do.
who's the Tom Buchanan in
It's one
this.
of the only
I
solid parts of that movie.
I disagree, but beyond that,
Yeah.
I don't think they're even you can even compare them. The movies are just living on different planets.
Hmm.
They're Gatsby's from parallel universes. They have almost nothing in common other than the story, which is a weird thing to say, but the production philosophy and the way they go at the story, like I can't compare like cartoony kabuki theater to like a naturalist performance. Like it's just so
Well,
hard for me.
for me though, I feel that Edgerton did portray the moments of kind of like being like cocky and full of himself very well. I feel like his escalation of agitation and abusiveness, especially towards like Myrtle, I think that was more like on point and like, you know what I'm saying? And then to me also as well, like the way he gets mad about Daisy, because I've sat with kind of like even when we originally talked about this and like had time, like you can see him physically, and even if it gets loud, like the way he gets mad about Daisy and Gatsby, because that is a big important thing, especially being the shitbag he is. I felt Edgerton's kind of gave me more of that like I had that
Yeah,
like
but that's the point of the Lerman version. Like everything is so broadly choreographed.
no, and I
Every
understand that, but it
character is
doesn't
like that.
always. It's not always successful in Luhrmann. Actually, most
I
of the
think
time, if not, like I
every
would say,
character.
like no, I would say like 85% of that movie is not. I'm just saying character wise because it is so big. Like you get
Yeah,
distracted a ton. Yeah, but I'm
yeah.
saying
No,
I will give like that performance to me was better.
okay. I mean,
I just
I
felt it
disagree.
more, like because I could
No, I
see.
understand, but I understand. But that is the point of Lerman's approach. Is that
Yeah,
is like he is doing the big cartoon opera, whereas like the '74 one is not doing that. It's not trying to.
I get
I
that.
honestly, you could say that Bruce Dern's Tom Buchanan is more like a real person would be in that situation, not like a fucking sweat pouring off of him, pacing around, like acting like a wild animal. Unhinged.
I
They're all
don't know.
unhinged because it's taking the sentiment of the wildness of the era and it's trying to inject that into everything that's going on. That's why the movie is fucking. And I complained
That
about the other movie being not paced very well, but this thing is like gives me a headache because it's
just
like
like all those
so
cocktails and
all over the
parties.
place.
I'm kidding.
It's just so erratic,
But I
like
can't like.
violently erratic.
So let me speak to you as a husband. Not that you wouldn't. be so over the top mad that you be knocking things down or viscerally sweating and pacing if like something had happened with
No,
us. Like,
not with quick pans and like Daisy. Like, come on. He's like a gorilla. He's like a bull in a china shop. There's one I think perfectly executed scene in the movie where everybody's great. It's the scene where Gatsby confronts Buchanan when they're in the hotel room.
yes,
That's the
yes,
best part of the movie to me. That's the one scene that if the whole movie was like that,
you're being fine.
the perfect balance, in my opinion,
No,
then
okay,
it would have been successful.
no, I
But
agree with you. I feel like there are so many problems with Baz Luhrmann. I mean, it's not like I don't want to like set it on fire because also it's like just a fun movie to watch and like talk about and think about.
sure, yeah.
Um, but no, I agree with you. That's probably one of the better scenes. I really don't like what they did with Nick as the narrator. I think it's garbage.
Yeah, like basically making him directly the Fitzgerald stand-in, and then the insane
Right.
asylum thing is because of Zelda, like just trying
Right.
to connect things, kind of in a messy, nebulous way that doesn't make sense. But
Words going across the screen like that.
oh, this is Baz Luhrmann, dude.
No, and I understand, but
I think because Sarah's never seen Moulin Rouge. If Sarah
no.
had seen Moulin Rouge, she would have been much more better prepared for
But
the
it's
Great
funny,
Gatsby.
I've seen enough scenes or music videos of the songs in it or related to where I feel like I get the vibe, sort of.
No, it's like very much like Moulin Rouge. I mean, not like the Great Gatsby, like that, like the kind of headache-inducing whiplash.
So you don't like Moulin Rouge, or you do?
I liked it when I was a teenager. I haven't seen it in a long time. I have not seen it in a long time, so it would have to really like go back and watch it again. I have a feeling I probably wouldn't like it now as much as I did then.
Hmm.
And I know that people that are into musicals despise it; they hate it. But
But they love Glee. No, I'm
no, they don't actually. No, they don't.
I'm joking. I was joking. They love
Um,
cats.
but like just going back to the cast and the way that
Hmm.
they kind of did the movie, I think DiCaprio is very well cast, and
Oh, I
especially
think he's great.
because of the style that they're going for. Because he's cast for the same kind of ostensibly for the same reason Redford's cast. They're
Mm.
movie stars. They're mysterious. Like you hire Leonardo
Good
DiCaprio
looking.
because
Yeah.
you liked watching Leonardo DiCaprio play a character, not because you're looking for him to get lost in the world. And that's like a very Gatsby type of affectation.
Yeah, very surface, very like fine to look at. But I will say, I give Leo, he did a very good job. And I don't know if you can really just maybe attribute that because it is one of the other like small saving graces in that movie. It's because he's worked with Boz Lerman before, so maybe knew what was going to be expected and how he could like work with
Oh,
that. No, I'm
yeah,
just saying, that might be in my opinion. I might be wrong, but like even just the way he says like old sport and stuff, and like
yeah, because I mean
he's just good at being like a skeezy dude. He also has like pussy posse bro with him, so you know.
yeah. No, I just think it's because just the parallels between the idea of being kind of a bachelor movie star and also being Gatsby, because
Yeah.
he's a movie star. He's like in the same way Tom Cruise. You don't hire these people because you think that they're like character, not like method actors. They don't fucking, even
No.
though DiCaprio tries to pretend to be one, but
No,
he's
he
not.
no.
Like because they just have an enigmatic presence and you just kind of like watching them. Even you
I
like
think
watching them
he's
put on funny accents and do whatever.
I think he's
But
like a fine actor. Like I
he
think
is,
he's gotten better with age, obviously. I mean, he started so young too, but I think he's fine. Um yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed him, but can we talk about the elephant in the room is Shmoby Maguire? We can all
but
agree he's fucking terrible. As
oh
usual.
yeah. Well, wait. Well, before we move on to Tobey Maguire, I just wanted to say that like if you watch because you watch the Redford performance and
Yeah.
DiCaprio's performance, you would think they're almost playing different characters.
Yes.
Like the interpretation of who Gatsby is by either of those guys is way different. Like
Yeah. So
Gatsby in the Redford one is more like traditional masculine, kind of just a guy.
so I guess to talk more about like so not just performances, I guess to lead us kind of more of in like a context or substance talk. Who did you believe had like in the performance wise, because they are so different, right? With Redford and DiCaprio, who do you think had like I guess like the more of the actual like pining for Daisy, and
Oh,
then
I mean,
who had more, and then who had more of the kind of like pining for the thought of Daisy. It's different. It's different.
yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to like make those things between the two performances, like because they're not doing the same things. The movies are just too different.
What I'm saying, because I think one shows.
I think DiCaprio, I guess if you want to just broadly speaking, he's more in love with the idea of Daisy than
Yes,
Daisy
that's what I
actually
was gonna
Daisy,
say.
because that's the whole arc of the character, and that's
Oh, it
probably
is
closer to the intention of the book.
100%.
Um, which fun fact, there's actually no scenes with just Daisy and Gatsby speaking to each other in the
No,
book.
no,
That's actually something that was invented
added
by
in.
Coppola.
Mhm.
Coppola put that in when he did his version in 1974.
Yeah, because I think always that was important because like whatever was private, but it's how you were displayed on public because it's actually like one of the other biggest like struggles or like focuses on the story is like your public persona versus your private life or your private ethic and actual understanding, you know, and trying to exist in this like indulgent, you know, world, I guess, you know.
Yeah. So, anyways, Nick
Yes.
Carraway,
Oh, fucking Toby
Toby
Schmoby. I
Maguire.
call him Schmoby. Schmoby Maguire. No, because he's awful.
I think he's like one of these guys that like his range is very much like he has to just be cast in something he's right for.
He just has to be cast where he can be weepy eyed.
I mean, I'm not gonna say
Even as
suggest like
Spider-Man, just
I grew
staring
up
at
watching
things.
those Raimi Spider-Mans. I really like, the first two.
Me
Spider-Man
too.
2 is still probably the best Spider-Man movie ever made.
Those Spider-Mans are great.
FYI. Sarah's like
They're
we
like
watched the Andrew Garfield one. She's like, yeah, that's my Spider-Man. I was
No,
like, oh
Andrew
God.
Garfield is not my Spider-Man.
That's literally what she's like when he's in the costume, that's Spider-Man. And I was like, okay,
I
Sarah.
have not said that.
Psych. You literally have said those words to me.
Well, actually, because it's also closest to the Amazing Spider-Man. So.
Yes, I mean it's what they're pulling from. So if you go to Raimi, he's pulling from like Golden Age comic
Yeah.
book 60s Spider-Man stuff. And then the Andrew Garfield one is like the 90s Spider-Man,
I was just trying to
2000s
be
Spider-Man.
I was just trying to be revisionist so we could just move forward with the
Now
conversation.
Tom Holland is just like a whatever for
I
no.
think Tom Holland's fine. I'm just gonna leave
Do
it
you
there
think Tom
because we don't
Holland
need to
would be
get in
a
this Marvel talk right
would
now.
Tom Holland be a good Nick Carraway? In the when Disney buys the rights to The Great Gatsby and remakes it, it's gonna be Robert Downey Jr. as Gatsby.
No.
It's gonna be Zendaya as Daisy.
No, Robert Downey Jr. is too old.
No, not anymore.
No, he'll be the guy that's like, I'm just here to read the books.
No,
Be like
de-aging,
in the
de-age,
background.
de-aging,
Oh yeah, that's true. The fucking
de-age. Disney is de-aging
oh, when
tech.
you see the face smoothing in movies nowadays, you're like, this is no, stop it.
But okay, so your feelings on Tobey Maguire's Nick Carraway?
Terrible.
See, I would never go so far to say it was terrible.
I almost think that, and you're gonna like think I'm terrible for this. Like, I think he's like almost autistic because he's just like, oh, all the
I
time.
think
Like,
he gets that a lot. Yeah,
I
that's most Tobey Maguire characters.
calls him like I sees him.
I don't know. I don't think it's just there's a self-importance in his like a maturity that's supposed to be there with his character as they have him because he's like the structure of the story is the one telling the story.
Yeah.
It cuts back like he does voiceover and stuff. Tobey Maguire, no fault of his own, sounds like a child. Like he's just he sounds like a little boy putting on a man's voice, and it's
I was
always
just gonna say
awkward
that.
and it's always weird. And there's a self-importance to that character specifically that is not doesn't kind of exist in a lot of the rest of the tone of the movie. It's like only Tobey Maguire's being that way, and everybody else seems more like they're in on the joke, they're in on the tone of what they're doing. Where Toby's just lost, like he's just out of his element.
Which I understand that, like, to a degree, Nick is supposed to be this person. He's coming into this world from the Midwest, trying to understand like the stocks and bonds, which is he ends up getting entangled out with like Gatsby and like his illicit affairs. Also returning to like family he loves and trying to find that. And then when he realizes the divide of like the eggs, as you call them, and the way life's going, even in the city and stuff, like he gets lost, but it's too doughy eyed. Not to keep talking about his dumb eyes, but it's too I don't know how to say it. It's too naive. Like he's not confident in the right ways. Am I not making sense?
Well, if you could just expand a little bit, maybe. I don't know.
Expand. So to me, is I feel like with like, so if we go back to the 74 movie with Nick, because it's a good grounding, I think, into the book. You get kind of caught up in the moments, right? I feel like the way Tobey Maguire took it is he gets very like you said, like lost, but also there's like I don't explain it. Like it's like disinterested, but also lost, if that makes sense.
See, I kind of like take his like naivete and his kind of childlike sense of wonder and attraction because that's what the character is supposed to be kind of experiencing. Like, to me, the problem with his character is when they go to him, supposed to be like this kind of older, more experienced guy, then it doesn't register. But when he's like just walking through like the party when he first goes to Gatsby's,
Yeah.
when he's awkwardly sitting at his Daisy's and Tom Buchanan's their house there, like those things, I was fine with that stuff. Like, it's anytime he has to like kind of emote other than like that dumb nervous grin.
Yeah, but it's also like, so I guess so as I've been like thinking, to me, like, so with Watterson, what they saved in actual like dumb stupid voiceover dialogue with the Tobey Maguire, because he's in the insane asylum or trying to write his first great novel or whatever, Watterson could literally do that with an observant look. So he was still lost and learning the world, learning how it all worked, but all he had to do was like look from the car.
Yeah, but that's
Or
also,
he had to like look. No, but I'm saying, so it's, but to me that
I understand that, but what I'm saying, you could not take Watterson's performance and put it in Baz Luhrmann's movie and it wouldn't work, and vice versa. You
no,
couldn't do
I
that with
know.
any of these characters.
So so I guess what that's implying is that like Tobey Maguire and his character did not work in Baz Luhrmann's movie for me.
I think most of it works. I think it's just like because he's so passive, like he's just not a big. He's a passive character. He's a big, that's the whole point because we're watching his version of the story. There's even in the Baz Luhrmann one, I think it's interesting in a meta sense that maybe they're trying to say that like the reason why it's so big and over the top is because this is Nick Carraway's like remembering this, and he's writing this because he was so taken with Gatsby that he wants him to be remembered. He wants him to have a legacy because he's dead and he's not going to have kids and he's not going to do whatever. So he's doing like his friend Gatsby a favor by writing about his crazy life, and he's exaggerating. Like, so even in context, some of the stuff. So when Gatsby and Nick are having that nightmare CGI car drive where there's just supposed to be just exposition of Gatsby telling him about his life, and it's like
the popping bottles of champagne.
But like when Gatsby rattles off kind of the details of his life and his war medals and all this stuff, it's so crazy. It's so like over the top. And now if you read the book or you watch the 74 movie, it's played completely straight. I mean, you may get the sense of like, oh, maybe he's a con man a little bit, but it's not played for. It doesn't feel as like hyper real as it does in the Luhrmann one. No. So I kind of like that it does have that little bit of an extra layer, a little bit of extra texture. What else was I going to say? There was something else that has something to like the meta layer of the movie. I can't remember. It'll come back to me. But so I think that there's, Baz Luhrmann is trying to do something different with it. It's such a staid story. I just think a lot of times he failed. That's all.
Well, also, and this is not saying this is something I don't care about, but I feel like because you have someone like Tom that is like a eugenicist or racist or whatever you want to call him.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. The
I
Nordic.
mean, that is
Nordic.
present in both movies and the novel.
I don't remember it in the 74.
No,
I
it's
don't
there.
remember it in the Baz Luhrmann one.
Because it's put in, like in the 74 one, so matter of factly that it didn't stick out to you.
No, the 74 one is the one I remember hearing it, and I don't remember in the Baz Luhrmann one. The 74 one, he says it like 10
So
times.
the Baz Luhrmann one, because the way they changed, like kind of sort of how the beginning of the book happens a little bit. What happens is Tom's talking about it on the entrance into the house, as opposed to when they're sitting down.
Yeah, but they only do it one time.
No, he mentions something later.
I don't remember the later
one. He talks
one.
about the Negroes later. He talks about it when they're drunk in the apartment in New York.
I think that's the 74 one.
No, they both do it.
I can't remember the 74
because that is actually a big crux of Tom's character. But like I said, it's not that I have a problem with this, but like you would have these like elaborate zoom in scenes in the Luhrmann one that were like focusing on like the ass shaking black strippers or dancers essentially in the underground like speakeasy or when they're driving on the bridge. And it's like, and I understand like bringing in like a voice or that modern context too, but I feel like sometimes focuses like that, you're just like, it takes you out of like you're trying to bring in like mixed messages sometimes, you know what I mean?
I don't think he's not trying to faithfully, recreate a time period or make you feel like you're in that time period. He wants you to feel like you're watching like a crazy parallel universe almost.
Music
but I do think in Luhrmann stuff, because I could be wrong. I 100% could be wrong, but I don't remember it like Tom Buchanan getting into it to any degree like he does in the 74 one, like at all. Like he brings it up like 10 times in the 74 one and in the book. In this, I remember, I hear what you're saying. It's like when he's rushing in through the door and he's like opening the door and he's like talking to somebody. I kind of remember that. I don't remember him bringing it up later though.
He does.
Okay, maybe he does. But I think Baz Luhrmann, his answer to that stuff was actually some of it, like that's the other meta layer of the movie, is kind of talking about this
when they're driving on the bridge and the bubbling up, and then it's like a gaze. Yeah.
Well, the bubbling up or the future coming for like people, like the future is black, and they're coming for they're coming for white people and their culture and stuff like that. I'm not saying that might be a little broad, but it's just like I think you could probably have an interpretation if you wanted to, just in the way they position it. Also, I found it a little racist, like even the use of the hip hop soundtrack and stuff, because you're like, oh, you're saying like this is like degenerate, like you're saying this is like over opulence, like as part of like what we talked about, the themes of Gatsby is like a little bit of the death of the American dream. It's the world is getting into a big it's peak hedonism for the era. The stock market's going to crash in a few years. Like it's going to be awful in a few years. And this was a time period kind of like the 60s, right? It's like it was in that cycle of like where it's like a sexual awakening and a youth culture again. And people kind of throwing their inhibitions. People weren't so interested or worried about trying to have kids and start a family. People were out for themselves. They were moving to cities. They were driving cars. Like that
every
was
20 years.
Yeah. But like, so if you're kind of like underlining in your movie, like, oh, this is black culture is the cool culture, but that would also be the road to ruin for like the context of the characters of the time, because that's part of the story. Not so much maybe Baz Luhrmann's, but because he's living in a fantasy universe. But if you're just familiar with the source material and stuff, it's just like, oh, well, that's kind of a weird thing that I don't think is supposed to be there, but I think you could pull from it if you wanted to.
Yeah, true. Did not think of that. You okay?
Yeah, I'm just fixing my cord. I don't know. What do you think of Daisy, Carey Mulligan?
No.
Yeah, even Carey Mulligan herself does not like this performance. In fact, she said she kind of stopped being in studio movies because of how bad of an experience it was. Not anything to do with like Baz Luhrmann or the other actors. It was, she found the technical side of this so distracting. She never felt like she actually found the character or gave a good performance.
Like, listen, you are on a green screen right now, and there is a bridge, and there are people driving by you. She's like, what?
Yeah.
No, not being like funny, but I am. But it's yeah.
Oh,
Um,
it's a jarring thing to do. Yeah.
I would say because for a long time I just thought she was not a good actress, but I thought she was fine in oh, was it Promising Young Woman?
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
actually kind of glad we saw that in the theater.
yeah,
I think
female
that was
Joker. Sure.
yeah, no, but I still thought it was a fine movie. Like,
I've liked it less as time has gone on. When I
oh,
saw
well
it the
maybe
first time, I was just like, it was okay.
yeah, it's
Like I
fine.
enjoyed it for what it was. I was like, nah, it's a little on the nose. I don't know if it's completely like understands what it's kind of saying, some of the implications of the movie. But because it's it's basically like no matter who you are, if you're a man, you're probably evil. Like that's kind of the takeaway. Even the nicest guy.
And guess what? You're right, sister.
And they ask you to question like the ethics of the main character, Carey Mulligan's character, but they kind of don't. Like,
The ethics are bad.
are you, somebody I was listening to somebody talk about it. They're like, "You're supposed to not like Carey Mulligan." I was like, "Yeah, bullshit. Like that's not how that movie was made."
No, I thought she was just as evil.
Maybe you did.
Anyway, I don't think as Daisy, I do feel like Mia Farrow in for all the faults that she has as well. I do think she was a little bit more like sardonic and which is very appropriate to the character of Daisy. I think she also like Mia Farrow gave that sass and also helped you question like, well, maybe she didn't like. She went back with Gatsby for that initial feeling, but then she was also doing it to like jab at Tom to be like, listen, like you fucked me over so many times. Like you could get kind of like that disdain sometimes from Mia Farrow. Carey Mulligan to me, I always felt like she was just on Xanax. If
Yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah. I guess yeah, I can see that. I think they're
Like I didn't see I mean, because like a really good scene to talk about like how you felt. So I'll put this on you. Compare the shirt scenes, but from Daisy's, like understanding Daisy. So like when they're throwing the shirts and how Daisy responds to the shirts, because that's important in the book.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I think they both do a fine job. I don't know.
I think
I mean, Mia
Mia,
Farrow's trying to go for like this much more like richer textured, like real naturalistic performance. So like
see,
she
and
probably
this,
comes off as more like it being more of an important moment.
yeah. Well, what I was gonna say was, so for me, it kind of speaks to what I was saying about like Gatsby, like who loves the concept of Daisy and who loves Daisy more, because it obviously in the book, the theme and through line is it's the concept, right? Because once you get past like the concept and realize the reality, it's gone, right? um but I feel like the movies portrayed all of that in different ways. So like with the shirt scene, it's like they're one of them is crying at the opulence because that's what they crave for, and that's important, and that's what's on target with the book. So I would say Mia Farrow does that because I feel like the focus with Carey Mulligan and Leo, or maybe sometimes how they acted, it you literally thought she loved him. That was never. I don't really think that was ever really.
Well, because like just like as much as I think Daisy is kind of a fantasy for Gatsby, Gatsby's a fantasy for Daisy.
Right.
And like, and she's almost just excited because she thinks like maybe there's a chance I can marry you now because you're not poor. Like
Yes,
that's
which
like her takeaway from like the shirts. Yeah.
yeah, but I just think like the sentiment that I took away from the portrayals, right? Like so, because then you can actually take this scene and lead it into the end, where like when they're running out of town and leaving, which I don't think the Boslerman really addressed or did very well at all. Um, but Mia Farrow still goes, Nikki, I'd like to see you sitting at my table, and like she's back to that same like.
You talking about the end of the movie?
Yeah, I'm saying, but you can.
Yes.
These are
Okay.
very parallel with Mia Farrow's performance, where it was like she's crying at the shirts because of the actual beauty and what they like are meaning in like status wise. It's her clout, right?
Hmm.
Or clout wise, and I think that's very telling. So I do actually guess more that we're hashing through this, like Mia Farrow did do a pretty decent job, I guess. Because like to me that's what that's about. It's like you want to achieve these perceptions because you want to achieve that like grand thought. And there's this hope that like love and all these things will last, or like that's what's important, but at the end of the day, it's something else. Right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think, Daisy's in a precarious situation. I don't think it's all fair to like, because I think Gatsby and Tom Buchanan are not very good to Daisy in a sense of how they
Mm-mm.
covet or they feel entitled to her. They feel entitled to her love and blah, blah, blah. I guess maybe you can make the argument maybe Tom has a little bit more of a case than Gatsby, but because they've built a life together, they have a kid together, yada, yada.
But
he
he's also
doesn't,
just been
but
like
he cheats on her all the time and he's not a great guy.
he's not
But
like
he,
abusive towards her, but then he takes that out on other women too. So
yeah,
it's kind of like fucking weird. Yeah.
but no, I think the Gatsby or the Luhrmann one doesn't get into that stuff because I think it wants to end on much more of this like fantastical, hopeful note about like the green light and all that stuff.
Which hope
Whereas
is so important, but not. Mm.
no, because well, I think the my favorite part of the 1974 one is like that ending scene, is that ending sequence where Mia Farrow's kind of just back to being a socialite.
Mm.
She's just kind of like, nah, I don't like Gatsby. Okay, I'm not coming to the funeral. Like, I'm not even going to talk to you.
Yeah.
I am just going to completely ignore this because I'm kind of a spoiled rich person. I don't have to. I can just leave town
Yeah.
and not have to deal with my problems that I've created. Like, I don't have
Because
to deal with it because of the class I'm at.
they're
And
selfish and they hide in their money.
sure. And I think in the 74 one, they really directly deal with that in just like the last 30 seconds of the movie, whereas where you see
Yeah.
Daisy and Tom Buchanan and other like kind of jazz era socialites and stuff like that getting on a boat to go party. And I think the green light's there, but it's very cynical because it's saying like all this stuff has happened. It didn't really even matter to them. They're just going to keep going. They're going to live their old life. Just kind of life continues for them.
It's actually a Jay-Z concert yacht party.
Probably, yeah.
Featuring Yeezy. Yeezy and Hova.
Yeah.
Anyway.
What fucking clowns, dude.
Right?
Imagine doing that, like marketing yourself as like God.
Yeah. It's happened
Whoa.
twice. Probably more than that, but yeah, those
Well,
two. Those two clowns. But executive producer, Shaun Carter.
nice. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I just like it's like the Luhrmann one is like kind of late era Tim Burton where it's just nothing satisfying. It's all like just artifice. It's all just like kind of the surface level. He's trying to do things, but he's also like it's like I don't even know how to describe it. It feels like it's like a guy who's like a little thinks he's a little smarter than he is, trying to like see this material with deeper themes and stuff, and he's like not connecting any of the dots sometimes.
Layers on the layer on the layer. It's
Yeah.
being an onion, man. Like I don't know. I feel like I said, this literally because I remember when they had announced that Luhrmann was going to do The Great Gatsby. In my head, I was like, this. I think I even might have said it to you before we saw it. I was like, this makes sense. Like, it should work, and it didn't. My opinion.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is because of his kind of need to try to do what he did with Romeo and Juliet with this material. I think if he had just done like a very lavish, like keep the same cast, keep some of the same like locations, like very lavish, very beautiful, just a little bit more straightforward and not fuck around. Like just do like a prestige old Hollywood movie that's like big and beautiful. Cause like you could still do the scenes with the fireworks and all this shit, but you don't have to have people like fucking like a band there, like doing choreographed dances. Everybody stops as a fucking flash mob at his party.
Well, I think and then also too is like the speakeasy scene where there were illicit dancers and stuff like that mentioned uh briefly in the book, but like I said, it was like ass shaking strippers almost,
Yeah,
like
no, it is because it's
objectifying very much.
but it's
And I'm
like,
not one to throw objectifying out there a ton,
well, it's
but
because it's trying to make this thing about like, yo, dude, you're a pimp, dude. You look at you at the club throwing
yeah,
dollar
well,
bills up, freaking
that's what I was thinking about
Cavassier.
with the yacht. It was like they were playing Big Pimpin' by Jay-Z. Just like,
Honestly, in the '74 one, when they go to the speakeasy and then when they go to like go hang out with Myrtle and stuff, like it's depressing.
and it
It's like
should be
depressing and kind of like
fucking
sad.
tears.
But I think that's also just because the director's like, I don't, yeah, I guess I'll just pan the camera over here slowly, and then we'll do some close-ups. We'll do cross-cutting, and we'll call
Yeah.
it a day, right, guys?
All
Watergate's
right,
happening.
what's for lunch?
Yeah.
I don't know. Um it's funny because you always like my opinion. So it's kind of like why I got excited about like some of the comic book movies and stuff. It's like you always kind of want to see literary things because yes, I will put comics sometimes with like literary existence. Like sometimes you really want to like see it all portrayed on the big screen, right?
Hmm?
I don't ever want to see Fitzgerald trying to just stop it. Just don't, because it didn't work for Fitzgerald. It didn't.
There's a couple
He
other
tried
movies.
theater. He tried. I mean, he contributed like editorial stuff to major movies like Gone with the Wind and things like that. It never worked for him. So just let sleeping dogs lie. You know. So
I think they did. Which other? Oh shit! I closed the window.
What are you doing?
No, because they've done other. You know, they did The Last Tycoon. It was like in 1976. They made a Last Tycoon with who the fuck was in it? God damn it.
I would.
I know Jack Nicholson's in it.
Oh, is he? I never saw.
Oh, it's Robert De Niro. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Robert De Niro, Tony Curtis, Robert Mitchum. Like, it's got a good cast, but I don't know anything about
Look at me.
it. Just saying.
Just throw in Pacino screaming like a fucking idiot.
Yeah, it's got a great cast, though. Donald Pleasance, Jack Nicholson, Dean Andrews. What else? Because there's been a few other ones. That he's been attributed to him, I think.
Fitzy?
Oh, they did it. They did a TV show of The Last Tycoon recently.
Yeah, not that long ago. I never watched it.
Duels, Great Gatsby, The Lost Decade. Somebody made a short.
Yeah, I know about The Lost Decade.
They did a Beautiful and the Damned movie.
When?
It's an Australian movie, 2009.
Yeah. That was Bozzy trying out his. No, I'm kidding. He's like, listen.
He's like, listen, mate, I could do this much better than you.
And then I'm trying to get another film made. No. No, I know. I honestly, like I said, kind of like just speaking to what I just said. I just never. It's one of those things. I just much more enjoy it when it's just like on the paper or I'm reading it out loud or something. You know.
Sure.
That's sure. Sure. Okay, you weirdo. No. No. I'm serious. Like there are, and like I said, it proved in his lifetime that like it didn't work. It like failed spectacularly. You know. So sometimes you're kind of like, I just let it be.
I mean, I think maybe his stuff just is, if you're not like savvy enough to like make it contemporary, it maybe just doesn't work. Like, because it is so literary in nature, and like there's full of literary tricks and literary devices, and you need to draw attention to those things for that story to have a greater impact. Whereas when you watch it in a movie, it just kind of falls flat because that subtext isn't there if you don't have a good enough filmmaker, good enough storyteller that's going to be able to take like, okay, what's the principle? What are the virtues? What are the morals of this book? And how do I communicate that without having somebody have to speak it out loud?
Well, that's like why This Side of Paradise would never work in that realm. I guess to speak to a comparison book to like all 10 viewers we're gonna get, or you. Did you ever read The Waves by Virginia Woolf?
No, I never have. No.
Oh, fantastic, awesome book. Actually, very very foundational in the way that like dialogue and perspective happens in a story, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like I never could expect that to be portrayed super well because you have to just kind of like read and get lost in it, because I think sometimes you just overstate so much with like visual, like you're trying to make up for something. So that's why I think sometimes Fitzgerald, like, he is so visual with like the words that like just stop, like don't touch it anymore. That's
Well,
how
I'm
I
sure
feel.
we'll get 10 more Great Gatsbys.
Yeah, probably.
Telling you.
I mean, and that's why, like, sometimes even with like Kerouac, another person I love very much, not for On the Road, but his earlier stuff is like his small stories about like they are coming to age, but they're also just so beautifully like described down to like the lighting and words. It's
Yeah,
just
I mean,
like sometimes
there's
you just like can't reproduce that. So sometimes just like stop.
well, it
Just don't do it
depends. Depends. But anyways, I could understand drawing a parallel between Fitzgerald and somebody like Kerouac, kind of similar, kind of reporting on their experiences in the moment, what it's like to be a certain age in a certain time.
Well, it's like Maggie Cassidy and The Side of Paradise are very like on par. But I would even say like The Ways by Virginia Woolf. I'm just saying, just sometimes like I guess maybe for me, it's just, I get so like hooked on a story, or just or just even how someone like the work that goes into like putting all of that into like paper. It just I sometimes just like, why are we doing this? Like, and it's no knock to cinema, because cinema is a very like great art form in itself, but sometimes it's just like move on.
Well, most things are adapted from something else, especially when it comes from movies.
Are they?
A lot of the adaptations out there, they're everywhere.
I didn't know that. I wasn't
Yeah,
aware.
yeah.
God,
Just so you know.
I have to reevaluate my life.
Like I don't think it's like a question of it being impossible. I think you just have the right person to interact with the material and you can do
Yeah,
it. But
fair.
I mean, but some things are just harder to adapt than others, and I think there is something about the Great Gatsby specifically that maybe just doesn't communicate very well unless you do something very inventive with it. Not like Baz Luhrmann, who just
Mm-mm.
was like did what his psychotic version of the Great Gatsby, but you have to
Maybe
make
he
it.
just like did a bunch of coke and was just like, "Let's go."
It's like, don't you like jazz? Don't
I'll
you
show
like
you
hip
the new.
hop?
I'll show you the new jazz.
Yeah, you could just see him smugly chuckling to himself in the theater, like,
But
dude,
he's like cuddling a
I just
koala.
did
So,
it. I just reinvented the wheel, mate.
like I said,
Sucks
cuddling
on a
a koala.
Foster's. Yeah, me and Mad Max. Yeah, mate.
Oh God, can you imagine? I'm
Baz Luhrmann did Mad
Australian.
Max.
Yeah, if he was like, I'm Australian and I'm just gonna do this. Can you?
Couldn't stop him. He's too powerful. Actually, I wonder what old Baz Luhrmann's doing right now.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
What's Baz Luhrmann doing? Oh,
Sitting
Moulin
on his
Rouge.
couch. Wait, what?
Uh, oh, that's right. I forgot. He's doing Elvis movies, filming it right now.
Who's
Stars
Elvis?
Tom Hanks, Austin Butler, Olivia DeJohn. Austin Butler is. Here, I can show you.
Who's
I'll show
Austin
it on screen.
Butler? We're getting
Austin
fancy.
Butler. This is
That's
the
Elvis.
that's the new. Actually, he looks a lot like a young Elvis. Good casting.
Hmm.
What else
It's gonna
has he
make his
done?
eyes bluer, but it's fine.
Oh, that's right. He's Tex in Once Upon a
Yes,
Time Hollywood.
I
He's in
know.
The Dead Don't Die.
And once you scrolled and I saw that, I knew exactly who he was.
Yeah, interesting.
Nice.
I mean,
Well, I mean,
I'm
it worked
sure.
out well for Solo. So.
Anybody else I recognize? Tom Hanks. Oh, that's what Tom Hanks was doing in fucking Australia when he got COVID.
Oh, this?
I bet he was filming this.
Is he the Colonel?
Yeah,
I
Colonel
can't see
Tom
your screen.
Parker.
It's kind of tiny.
Oh,
Or
sorry.
tiny. No, it's
Sorry for
okay.
your taste. All right, but
No,
anyways,
it's good. I feel official that you did a screen share with me. Oh my gosh.
there you go. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'll probably watch it at some point. Sure, why not?
What else we got going on?
That's my ringing endorsement. I've been meaning to because he has another movie he has one movie I haven't seen, which is Australia with Nicole Kidman
I
and
haven't seen
Hugh
Australia.
Jackman.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. Both
We
native
have it.
Australians.
We own it. We've never watched
We
it.
own it, but neither of us have seen it. This
Yeah.
speaks to an issue.
That's what he did after, right after Moulin Rouge. Because, you know, I always get scared off from it because it's 3 hours long. So I'm always like,
Okay,
when
says
am I
the
going to do
man
this?
that's so stoked for the Snyder Cut.
That's different.
No, it's not.
It's different.
Because
It's
what you're
history.
getting right.
It's history. I get to see like two different cuts of like the same movie. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool to me.
With like a few new things sprinkled in.
No, dude, it's like 90% new things.
Yeah, but then, or you could watch like a
awesome.
historic, massive work that someone just did and it got released. And you're like, 3 hours is too much, but give me 5 hours.
3 hours is an intimidating runtime. It's an intimidating
nice.
runtime where you're just like, oh, when am I gonna like watch this World War II era Australia movie?
As many times as you rewatch like Dunkirk and then the commentary, or
yeah, because it's a 90 minutes. Like I can watch that
and then you watch the commentaries and then videos that are subsequent to. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So now I'm gonna have to do that with this, and then take even more time on the back end because this is 3 hours long.
Says the man that's gonna watch the Snyder
Sarah
Cut.
like literally watches nothing but awful reality shows, and she's over here trying to give me the business about not feeling prepared or ready to watch Australia because it's so long.
So I'm going to publicly say what I say to you. I deal with such a wide variety of people from 17 to 103. And most of them are
excuses.
Dumb. Most of them are dumb. So when I come home, sometimes I have like scrambled egg brains because I am very much the like, hi, how you doing person. And it's exhausting. So I watch dumb TV.
No excuse. When you were a young woman and you didn't have access to all these shows, what would you do? You'd go home and pop in a DVD of a movie.
Yeah, and I'd read.
Exactly.
Before I met someone.
Not me. All right.
That's true.
Do you have any kind of final thoughts or any kind of things you want to leave everybody with in terms of The Great Gatsby? Do you think The Great Gatsby is worth reading when you're a teenager? Should they make kids read this book?
So I would say, like, I think if it's required reading in high school, I think This Side of Paradise would be more effectual because it's more accessible. Still has the same quality of, like, language and structure experience to a degree. So I think if you're recommending it in that way, This Side of Paradise. But I would say just, read Fitzgerald. Read it. Even his short stories that necessarily weren't his most proudest of works are still fine.
Okay.
Like a passing read. But I would say if you had a SWIT, that's the only complaint I have sometimes. Is like, you make the kids read This Side of Paradise first.
Okay.
And I think you get a better result because it literally leads you through like a guy's life in trying to figure out going to college and then like dealing with like the progressions of love in his life. It's like 5 different women and it goes by chapter. Amory Blaine is a really great character. You kind of hate him less than you'd even hate most people in Great Gatsby. So that's my own suggestion, but yeah, still read it.
Which movie do you show people? I know you've kind of said this, but at the end of the conversation, have you reconsidered?
No, it's still 74. I don't care. If you get bored, get the fuck out. No, or it's talk to me about it, you know?
I would say watch the 74, but I also would not say don't watch the 2013 one. While I don't think it totally works, it is an interesting kind of conversation piece, if you will. Like if you're into the story, especially if you're into The Great Gatsby, like maybe you just heard, I don't know, hopefully. It just gives you lots of things to think about, and it makes you think about the themes and what makes the story work a lot because of how many things it does wrong.
Yeah.
So you can actually have like a clear example of like, oh, it doesn't really work in this context you presented in, but it works in the book. So now I have something to juxtapose it against. And I think it's probably more engaging in a weird way than the 74 one, because the 74 one feels so much just like the book. It's a very straight adaptation, but adds a few things, but it's a pretty straight adaptation.
And you're trying to like cap off the night, but like I guess that leads me to ask you. So like so we decided to do this. Someone suggested like let's talk about Great Gatsby, right? And then let's talk about movie and the film, but the Baz Luhrmann one didn't exist, do you think you'd feel less inclined to, or it would be more difficult to talk about things because it was very like par for par, and it didn't give you kind of some other like notes or
Well, I think
trails to talk about?
because we covered so many things. We talked about Fitzgerald, we talked about the book, we talked about both of the movies. I feel like the conversation by necessity has to be a little broader.
Okay.
So if we had only done one of these, then I would have gone very hard into just one of them. And I would have
Yeah.
done more with them. But having to watch both of them and kind of look into the productions and see what the actor said and do all that kind of stuff, just so I can kind of sprinkle it throughout the conversation, it
I'm
kind of
sorry.
stops me from just going and focusing intensely. Like most of the time, I do one of these, or it's usually movies I've seen a lot as well. So, I'm probably a little bit at a deficit in terms of knowledge of the story in general, knowledge of the movies, because it's just not something I have a lot of familiarity with.
Right.
So it's not something that I've seen a million times. So I'm like, oh, I can easily go and discuss the depth of the themes and things that were going on. As a person that's just not very invested in that specifically, it's kind of hard to almost hard to focus on something in particular, I guess. I don't know.
Well, and a lot of the struggle too is you weren't very super close with source material because you didn't even have the external source material besides that story.
No, and then I didn't just to be able to get it done because we're adults, we have a kid, we have a kind of busy life. Just to be able to get it done, I had to listen to the audiobook. That's never my preferred way to go back and do something because you can miss a lot if you're listening to an audiobook. So
Yeah.
But say if we had just picked one of them, I
Mm-hmm.
probably would have just
Thelma Luhrmann.
no, I probably would have picked the 74 one.
Really?
Yeah. I'd rather watch something like that than because the Luhrmann one I just knew what it was.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Again, I could have made reference to the Luhrmann one without actually having watched it again. Because when I watched it, I was when we watched it, I was just oh, I just remember all this is not even. It's for whatever reason, it's seared into my brain. I just remembered so much of it. I guess in that sense, it's memorable.
Mm.
It's a memorable movie. I don't know. It doesn't make it a good one. I mean, Batman
Yeah.
and Robin's very memorable. I wouldn't say it's a good movie.
Oh my gosh. See, every time we talk, we constantly mention things, and I'm like, can we talk about Batman and Robin? No, I had a request. And I was going to ask you if you invite me on again. I don't know if you will. What do you want to talk about next?
I thought you just said you had a request.
Yeah, well, they shoot horses, don't they?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Which is a very fantastic film. It's awesome, very styly, important, and makes sense. But also the first movie I showed Shaun that he had never seen before. That was also good.
It's I would call it a kind of somewhat a dystopian.
It's like Running Man.
Yes and no. I mean, it's a dystopian. It's kind of subtly dystopian sci-fi, but it's really just more about philosophy and stuff
And
like
people.
that. And
Yeah.
directed by Sidney Pollack. It's a very good movie. I think it's probably still on YouTube. If you can just look up "They Shoot Horses, Don't They?"
Yeah, that's how I actually first watched it.
Yeah. Well, it's a great, just I guess to end the night or whatever, and this is a side tangent, if you can't find something, if you just think it's out of print or whatever, go check YouTube. People put up movies. I've been watching more movies on YouTube lately because I've been watching more obscure stuff that's just harder to find, and maybe it didn't make it past VHS. It never went to DVD, and then it never went to Blu-ray.
Can I piggyback off that?
Yeah.
Also so if it's not movies and you want to do books, find Project Gutenberg.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a place you can find a lot of free PDFs of a lot of the unattainable things or just things you want to read for experience, and they're free and downloadable. So
very cool.
So I guess to, like I said, piggyback off of like find videos on YouTube and stuff. Just you do that sometimes. You want to read something or you're curious about a subject matter. You can go to Project Gutenberg and type in and find a lot of like free text.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Also, the Internet Archive is pretty good for that as well.
Yes. Or any local public library archive.
Yes, if they're like in a database that you have access to, the internet
Actually,
or
you
just
can.
the Internet Archive, you just gotta sign up and you can basically borrow books like you do any digital thing.
What I have actually found, just through like buying a house and trying to figure out like design and stuff, you can actually access a lot of library like archives, including like photos and those kinds of things, just through the internet. You don't have to sign up for anything.
Okay, that's cool.
There's a lot of like just archival like search bases. So yeah, and I'm not trying to take away from what you were trying to end with, but that's very important in the modern era. Just
Well, a lot of things could potentially get lost or they don't make like because the reason I actually rediscovered the Internet Archive was because I was looking for a copy of The Short Timers, which is the book that Full Metal Jacket is based on. I couldn't fucking find it. It was on eBay for like
about that.
hundreds of dollars. I was like, there's not like a Kindle version. This is the fucking source material for Full Metal Jacket, like one of the most popular American movies ever made. And no, it's been out of print since like the 90s. And but Internet Archive, they had somebody literally scan the whole book, like page by page, and that's how I read it. So good on them. Good on these heroes. These heroes out there trying to preserve our our literary and film culture.
Yeah, 100%. Art's important.
It really is. It really is. And so is The Great Gatsby. And thank you, Sarah. I appreciate you coming on, talking Gatsby. And we will see you guys in the near future. We're probably next time with Sarah, we'll be talking about They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Probably look forward to that in the next couple weeks. Give you a chance to go check out the movie. Because if you've never seen the movie, I would highly recommend it. Spoiler alert, I like the movie. So what we're going to do when Sarah and I do it, we'll just basically just be tearing through the movie, talking about what we like about it, what we don't like about it, talking about the themes, talking about all that good stuff. Go check it out. All right, everybody. Goodbye.